Welcome back to Small Caps. My name is Kerry Stevenson. Today, I'm speaking with the Executive Chairman and CEO of PharmAust, Dr. Roger Aston. ASX code is PAA. Dr. Aston is joining me from Oxford, all the way over there in the UK. And PharmAust have got clinical trials on their lead product, MPL, which we'll go into in a minute. Dr. Aston, good to see you all the way from Oxford. Thanks for joining me on Small Caps today.
Good to see you, Kerry. It's been a while.
It has been a while. So because it's been a little while, why don't you give us an update, our audience, an update on who are PharmAust?
PharmAust, let me give you a little bit of background. PharmAust is a small cap Australian ASX listed company. It's been focused on cancer research, but this is now diversifying a little bit, and I'll come to that in a moment. Historically, we've demonstrated that Monepantel, or MPL as we'll refer to it, is effective in suppressing tumor markers in human patients with cancer. We've also shown that it is very effective in extending canine survival with B-cell lymphoma. And we've also shown recently that it has some antiviral activity. So what I'd like to do is to talk a little bit about the rationale as to why we're focusing now to do 3 clinical trials in 2022, and why we can have diverse targets, in other words, ranging from MND to canine cancer to human cancer and so on. So starting at the beginning, for what we're doing for 2022 is that we are starting 3 trials. The first of the 3 trials is a trial for MND, which is motor neuron disease. And part of the reason that we're focusing on this is that we have received a large grant of almost $900,000 to evaluate Monepantel in MND, or ALS as it's also known as. And you might well ask, why is it useful in treating motor neuron disease? Well, it's all part of the mechanism of action, which is central to metabolism in eukaryotic or mammalian cells. So what it does basically is it's a drug that suppresses metabolism generally. So why is that important? Well, it slows down tumor cells growing. If you shut down metabolism, the cells don't replicate. In the case of MND, we're hoping it will inhibit the protein production in the brain, which is not properly folded and causes attrition or degeneration of motor neurons in the brain. So we're now focusing on these 3. The MND trial is at the front of the queue. It's just starting now. We've just completed all the paperwork, and we'll be looking at screening of patients and admitting or enrolling patients into the trial in June, this June, in a few weeks.
Just before you move on to the next bit, motor neuron disease is an awful disease. There hasn't been anything to help it in the past. Are you the closest ones to being able to do a clinical trial to try and work out how to stop this terrible, awful disease? Is there anyone else doing something similar?
There is a product that is used, and it has a limited value. It's quite toxic, and it typically will extend survival by a few months. We don't know how our product is going to perform, but if it can inhibit or slow down the metabolism in the brain of poorly folded proteins, we think this will be a plus for us, and we may see. So we are measuring how much we can extend the life and the memory and all the associated endpoints that we'll be looking at. And there are endpoints which will be tested. It's not just a safety study. It is defined as a phase 1 study, but we'll be looking at what we call the surrogate endpoints. which will tell us, is it working? You take cerebrospinal fluid, and you can actually see these proteins in there, and you can measure them and say, yes, it is having an effect, or no, it isn't.
What's the sort of timeline for doing this sort of a trial? How, were we talking years, or are we talking what's?
No, I hope it's not going to be years. We've done all of our groundwork, and the protocol of the trial is pretty comprehensive. But it is a phase 1. It's never been in MND patients before. And phase 1 means you start at a low dose and you slowly build up the dose in the patient. And as you build up the dose, you start looking for efficacy measures. How much longer does the patient survive without further degeneration? And that's an important hard endpoint, if you know what I mean. So we think that the trial will start is starting now, and there'll be a screening of patients, and there will be a recruitment of patients, and we will report not on a patient-by-patient basis, but if we see safety, number one, being demonstrated, we'll report that. And as soon as we see some efficacy, we'll report that as well. And of course, once we've received some evidence of efficacy, there will be pressure to continue using the drug in patients because of the shortage of good products to treat the disease. So we've focused on the mechanism, which gives us this diversity, but we've also now got much better data out of canines, where we have treated them with Monepantel with standard of care, and we show that we can, as we mentioned earlier, that we can double the life expectancy of the dog. In other words, we induce stable disease. We shut off the metabolism of the tumor, and it just sits there, or possibly regresses, but most of the time it just sits there, and the dog is living with its cancer instead of dying with its cancer, if you like. So,
how far? Sorry to interrupt you. How far along are you? I just want some clarification around this. The current dog trials, are they phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3? Whereabouts are you at with that?
We're in phase 2 and still optimizing, and we have said to the market that we're looking to go into phase 3, but other factors have come into play now, which are putting us in the position where we're debating whether to do the phase 3 ourselves, or perhaps have a big pharma take an interest in the company and take up the challenge of doing the phase 3 trial, probably in the United States. And that's attractive to the shareholder. It reduces the risk. And we have now had some interest to open dialogue. It's early stage yet, so just opening up the dialogue with major companies. And the data is now starting to look as if we have a good target market. So, I mean, the market works like this. You have sort of a range of opportunities to treat your dog. It shows up with B-cell lymphoma, which is the cancer that's a very common cancer in dogs. The dog shows up, and you've got the choice as an owner of either putting it down there on the spot, giving it chemotherapy, and it will live for 9 to 12 months with the associated side effects and costs. So chemotherapy can cost up to $10,000 for a course of treatment, which not everybody wants to pay for a dog that isn't going to be cured. It's a palliative.
Right.
So what we're doing is basically offering a product that is going to extend the quality of life and the stable disease, shall we say, or progression-free survival, if you want another term for it, where the dog still has its cancer, but it's alive, it's well, it plays ball in the garden with the family, and the rest of it. So that's what you really want at the end of the dog's days.
Absolutely.
So we think this will be an attractive niche for our product, and it'll be somewhere between chemo and standard of care, which is a drug called prednisolone, which is an anti-inflammatory drug, just to make the dog feel a bit better. So we think we've carved out a financially attractive niche to develop for canines. But all this then overlays on the human side. As I said to you earlier, the canine drugs are the same as the human drugs by and large. Getting good canine results is very telling as to what we might expect in humans. And that's, of course, part of our next stages. We were going to do it, or we have identified some European sites who have put their hand up and said, we'd like to do a human trial in diseases such as pancreatic cancer or other serious cancers. And just recently, we've also had interest, again, early stage, we're open dialogue from a US research institute to explore our product in a particular cancer that they think it'll work very well. So we have a lot of opportunities on the table at the moment. And we think as this year elapses that little PharmAust will become a pretty exciting opportunity.
It's interesting going from sort of the animals into the human side of things. You delayed the COVID trial. Can you explain the rationale behind that? Yes,
we were initially looking at recruiting patients in Australia, but I don't know if you're aware, but Australia has now overtaken the US and Britain in terms of vaccinations. I think we're up at about 87% vaccinated. And of course, the ones who aren't vaccinated are often asymptomatic, and those aren't the patients we want to treat. We have evidence for antiviral activity, so we want to see patients who haven't been vaccinated, who have active viral disease. They're sick. And
she says
what we want to do is, it's a virus. So I've lost my thread.
You're looking for the unvaccinated people because then that will show you the efficacy of the drug. If they're vaccinated, it will give you a false positive. Is that what you're saying?
Well, the vaccinated people are reducing the virus, so we wouldn't be able to tell how much is the vaccine, depending on when they were vaccinated, of course. We wouldn't know how much was the contribution of the vaccine and how much was the contribution of the drug. So we've turned our attention to Eastern Europe, which we thought was a great idea until the Ukrainian war broke out. But we have now found a number of sites who've put their hand up and said, yes, we're interested in discussing a COVID trial. We have patients who are unvaccinated and who are coming in as sick patients into the hospital. And often they don't have the money to buy the expensive antivirals.
Yeah.
And they're willing to test MPL. And the way it will work is basically to measure the virus in the bloodstream. You give the drug. If you show that that you can reduce the virus, then you're in a strong position. And there was another aspect. It's not just the delay here. The other aspect was if we're doing the MND trial as a phase 1, that will give us all the information to basically pursue the COVID trial with the phase 1 data from MND, which gives us a saving of about $1.5 million in the company. And we can go potentially into a full phase 2 trial with COVID instead of a phase 1.
So what can our audience expect from you? Well, I'm talking to you at the end of May. There's a lot going on, lot going on with PharmAust. So the main product being the MPL and the rollout of that. What's the news going forward in the next few months?
Well, I think there's several items of news. Of course, the MND trial is just now starting, so we'll have ongoing reports for our shareholders on that. Excuse me. We have the COVID discussions with potential investigators in Europe, which we'll report on. And we have opened up dialogue with companies now to look at the phase 3 trial in dogs and basically licensing activities. And I think the COVID trial will follow on from the MND trial, as I just mentioned, with the availability of phase 1 PK, what's called pharmacokinetic data. You give them a tablet, how much is in the blood and so on. So that data package will go to support the COVID trial in countries such as Bosnia and Poland and so on, which we've opened up dialogue. And I think it's exciting times. I think it's taken us as a company a long time to get here, but things take time in this industry. And I think that if one is a betting man, as we all have been in terms of participating in the funding of the company moving forward, we've reached a stage where I think we can confidently say that the drug works.
Yeah,
it works.
Exactly. I guess that's what I was getting to. It sounds to me like you're very confident that this drug works, and it works and is very effective. So does that mean that your PharmAust goes from sort of, a small, if you like, biotech into something that some big pharma is going to start to take notice of, which could become a game changer fairly quickly? Now, look, I'm not putting words into your mouth. I'm curious as to whether or not is that what happens next?
That's typically what happens next. Once you've got solid data in cancer that your drug is extending or doubling the life expectancy of a dog, you're on very firm ground for what it might do in humans. Now, I wouldn't be able here and now to say it's going to work well in, say, lung cancer or bowel cancer or pancreatic cancer, but it will find one or more niches in cancer. And cancer is a massive area. It's a $50 billion market out there. And having a product that can extend survival by 3 months, say, is $1 billion product in that industry.
Why MND? Because as you just said, there's pancreatic, there's lung, there's all sorts of different cancers, and it's a $50 billion industry, massive. Why MND? Why not others? And how do you navigate through this particular product?
MND came along because FightMND put their hand up and said, we like this. The principal investigators, who are joint principal investigators between, one's in Sydney, one's in Melbourne, they reviewed our work and they said, this is a drug we want to test in MND. It's a serious disease. It's devastating to families and patients. And we have 2,000, I think, people in Australia who have it. And of course, globally, the number is much larger than that. And there's 2 new cases a day in Australia. So we were persuaded to, we didn't take much persuasion, but we were persuaded to accept the grant and put MND high on the list. And as it's turning out, the MND is going to help us in our other clinical trials by providing good human pharmacokinetic data. As I mentioned right at the beginning, we did do a trial in humans at the Royal Adelaide Hospital a few years ago, but that was with a different formulation. Since then, we have focused on, and we've spent the last year and a half optimizing the manufacture and the compliance of the drug with global standards. It's what we call GMP product, and making the tablets in the United States and shipping them to the different sites and so on. So there's been a lot of sort of what I call invisible background work, which shareholders automatically say, well, you just order the stuff and it comes in. Well, it's not quite like that. It's manufacturing is a massive task in terms of regulations and compliance, and you've got to get it right.
Yeah.
And of course, if you're looking for major corporations to invest or acquire, they're going to look very hard at the quality of the work that's been done. And I think we've done that.
Sorry to interrupt you. The Epichem is the wholly owned subsidiary down here in Australia. Is that correct? Of PharmAust?
Correct. Yes. They manufacture, but they're small scale manufacture. They more on quality than quantity.
Right. And they will be doing some of the manufacturing?
No, but they've been doing some of the testing for us, purity testing and advice on optimizing the manufacturing process. to give you a better product at the end of the day. All pharmaceuticals have impurities, just depends whether it's just a tiny amount or an offending amount. Getting it right is really what the manufacturing process, and reproducibility. I mean, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, expects you to have 2 sites available and ready to go to manufacture a drug, because you might have a fire and if you have one site and it burns down, then it takes you years to build another site, not days or months.
Of course, yeah. Well, you've had some changes recently. It would be remiss of me not to mention the fact that Richard Mollard, who I think was one of your chief scientific officers, who has been with the company, I think 5 or so years, he's recently resigned, and you've brought on board Fiona Milner. Could you just explain what Richard's leaving the company and why Fiona's coming on board?
Well, I think firstly with Richard, I mean, his reasons for leaving, of course, are his own, and even if I knew all of them, I wouldn't want to disclose them, but he's been our right-hand man. He's been the key person on coordinating the manufacture and clinical trials, and I think I speak for the board in saying that it was disappointing that he decided to go, but understandable, because obviously I've talked to him about it. Will we replace Richard? Yes, of course. As time progresses, we'll look for, but it won't slow anything down. He's been very good in that he's brought us to a stage where everything can just now run whilst we look for a new Richard. Fiona Milner has joined us as general manager of Epichem, and I think, judging from her history with Novartis and Aventis, I think she's been a really good buy for us. We're excited at the prospects of working with her and building up the sales of Epichem. And we've also put in a business development executive to work with her to facilitate getting the business into the company, number one, and 2, of course, building the business itself to tackle, as we mentioned earlier, larger volumes of material to support commercialization and so on.
Well, Roger, I've been very remiss because it's been a year between our chats, which I cannot believe when we said that before. So we're not going to let that happen again, because first of all, I congratulate you on the amount of progress that has taken place in PharmAust. And I'm not sure that the market fully understands just how far you've come, because in getting drugs like this as far as you have and to these stages, and as you said right at the start, 3 clinical trials that are in progress, if you like. So we're running out of time. It's an investor audience out there, our community. So if we could just wrap this up in a nice bow and let them know in 3 reasons why you think right now PharmAust should be on their radar going forward.
I don't know. I guess the key points which come to mind are 3 trials, of course. It's 3 shots at goal. We have good evidence to suggest or to implicate that Monepantel MPL will be effective in all of them. But life isn't like that. Maybe it's only going to be cancer, or maybe it's only going to be MND, but it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if we can show in a clinical trial that the drug is effective, we're talking of really substantive markets for a small company like PharmAust. I think that the second factor that has made me very confident that we're heading in the right direction is the fact that the data coming out from the canines is very convincing. We can extend significantly the survival of dogs on MPL with standard of care, over and above standard of care, basically inducing progression-free survival, and it gives the opportunities for the owners to say their goodbyes to their pets and so on. And of course, the implications in canines are similar for what you expect to see in humans. And of course, that's the real market at the end of the day. We can take the canine data and show them to a major human drug corporation, and I think they will sit up and take note. I think thirdly is really as we go during the course of the year, as we go public with the advancements and hopefully successes that we will achieve, we will see one or maybe more major corporations stepping in and taking an interest.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Big Pharma has its eyes on the prize. Roger Aston has been doing the work because they have got 3 clinical trials in place in 2022. They've got that evaluation from the dogs and that clinical care, which has been doubling the expectations for, what is it, end of life compared to standard care using the drug. And you know what, Dr. Aston, for me, the MND trials, the motor neuron disease, but that is just an awful disease. I wish you all the best with that one, because that, to me, that's a global challenge, which if PharmAust can crack that code, exciting times ahead. Thank you so much for joining me on Small Caps today.
Thank you, Kerry. Appreciate it.